always give what you can, even if your allies draw lines in the sand. And dig, always dig a little deeper. Some love, so you let love in. Baby, I am home in the wake of your skin, and it's crazy how we wear a ceremony. Always be open to your path and your journey. Yes, she cradles my loneliness, a home in a forest nest. Universal test, feel the weight of my love. Put your hand on my chest and rest in the cradle of my arms. The battle that we face is a place where our scars come from. And to pick up the gun, my love, we are destined to teach these ones to be brave. And the place where our scars come from. Courage is birthed from the womb on the first light of day. Yeah, the day you were born, you came out perfect, never meant to be torn in silence. Never been so loud in the violence, never been so proud of our people. When we're fighting for a change, not afraid to lose it all. Despite all the rage, we are animals, and we cannot be caged. Provoke us to fight, so we burn a little sage and write poetry. Wiser than the enemy will ever be. The minority and authority. Are you here to protect or arrest me? I can't tolerate the hate and I'm losing sleep. Can't breathe cause they're choking out a war in me. Immorality, yeah. Love letters to God. I wonder if she reads them or if they get lost in the stars. Stars and stars. Yeah. So many parts to a heavy heart. If there's no beginning, then where would you start? Start, where would you start? Human souls, so we carve them into story-totem pose. Cause we're always searching for a certain goal, a pattern of physics, a role. Don't believe how you're told, and open up your fist. A misconception, you can fight like this and praise. With the power of prayer, if God's on our side, we can take the stairs to the heavens. Flipping through my chapter 7, I live with the snakes and the great deception, no court. In this country for men who steal from the mother on paper with pen. And we're tripping down a red dirt road and we're asking, is this the way we should go? Kissing soft top feet, oh my God, this we walk the earth, baby, yeah, we got this focus. And it's redirected, grateful, and I'm resurrected, stubborn. But I know the way, you're the skin on my drum to your rhythm, I will sway, take my hand, I won't lead you astray. We will not go gently into the darkest of days. Grandma's here, and she says persevere. Take a walk in her moxie's a trail of tears.
Good evening. This is Bold Like a Leopard, and I want to welcome you to another session of my live streams. I do want to mention that tonight I'm actually going to be also live streaming on Telegram. And as a matter of fact, let me see if it's even rolling. Um, because, let me see here. I've never tried it before. So far as I know it's, wait 1 second. I don't believe it's rolling. So I guess we're not streaming on Telegram. Anyway, um, tonight we're going to talk about a serious topic. Unfortunately, in such a serious world, you have to try to keep a sense of humor. But we're in a bad spot as a country, and I don't know what the way out of it is, if there even is a way out of it. And why am I saying that we're in a bad spot as a country? Today, you might have heard that a corporate accountant named Alan Weisselberg was allowed to enter a guilty plea on tax charges relating to his work for the Trump organization. He was the chief financial officer, that's the head honcho for all of the bookkeeping at Donald Trump's company, the Trump organization. He actually was there, and this was a very interesting detail. He was there since before Trump was running the company, when Trump's dad, Fred Trump, was running it. And the reason I think that this is a pretty disturbing development is because you have to look at which criminal charges he was convicted of. Okay, it says here the longtime chief financial officer of the Trump organization on Thursday pleaded guilty to all 15 criminal charges in a criminal tax evasion case involving former President Donald Trump's family business. Alan Weisselberg was accused of taking more than $1.7 million in back channel payments from the company. His defense lawyer, Nicholas Gravante, said in a statement that entering the plea was one of the most difficult decisions of Weisselberg's life, but that he wanted to end, quote, the years long legal and personal nightmares it has caused for him and his family. Rather than risk the possibility of 15 years in prison, he has agreed to serve 100 days. We are glad to have this behind him, the statement said. Um, for decades, Weisselberg has had his fingers on the pulse of the Trump organization's finances. Here's what we know about him. Who is Alan Weisselberg? He was the Trump organization's chief financial officer. A role he assumed in 2000. Raised in Brooklyn, he is widely seen as a hard worker and fiercely loyal to Trump. He deviates from the bombastic nature of many of those in Trump's inner circle, having been married to his wife Hillary for over 50 years and called quiet and shy by colleagues. Um, so this isn't really going into what was done, but it says, what did the Trump Organization indictment say? The Trump Organization and Weisselberg in 2021 were charged in a 15-count indictment alleging criminal tax fraud, conspiracy, and falsifying business records. Independently, Weisselberg was charged with grand larceny in connection with failing to pay taxes on $1.7 million in off-the-books benefits for his family. And remember, that's benefits. So what they're doing is, this is what I'm trying to get at. It's not as if they gave him a pallet of cash that they hid somewhere in an underground cave. They were giving him all sorts of perks through his job, and the federal government decided to value that at $1.7 million. And here it says, in all, he avoided $556,385 in federal tax payments, $106,568 in state taxes. That's for the state of New York, and $238,159 in local New York City taxes. That charge is Weisselberg's most serious threat. It carries a maximum punishment of 5 to 15 years in prison. The Trump organization faces fines of hundreds of thousands of dollars if convicted as a criminal enterprise. So this is what all the trouble is for, that they want to fine the Trump organization and accuse them of tax evasion. And here's the question: what perks did Alan Weisselberg's family allegedly receive? Prosecutors allege that the Trump organization and Weisselberg ran a tax fraud scheme that funded luxury car leases, family members' tuition payments, and apartment rent starting in 2005 and running through 2021. So basically, what they're saying is that they gave him a vehicle to use as part of his job, and they paid for one of his relatives' tuition. Who it was, I'm not quite sure. Um, in fact, they're linking to the same article, but um, it's it's just it's just ridiculous here. And what I'm trying to get across is that Alan Weisselberg, his job as the CFO at the Trump organization was not to pay the maximum amount of tax in order to get the government off his back. It was in order to use the tax code so that the company could make as much money as it can without paying as much tax as normally it would owe. And that's why there are skilled tax attorneys and accountants out there that will go through the tax code and find ways to make deductions and get credits and write-offs and also and depreciations, all sorts of ways that you can um, keep income and protect it. So this concept that he violated the law is interesting because they're not saying that by his actions in running the Trump organization, in dispensing its funds and keeping its books, that he committed a crime. So they're not saying the Trump organization committed a crime through his work there. He didn't hide income for the company. He didn't shield it in an improper way or misreport it or any of the other different offenses that normally you would see a corporation be accused of tax evasion or another financial crime by the IRS. They're saying that the personal benefits that he received in the form of a personal use vehicle, in the form of, I believe there was also some apartment suite that he was using, and in the form of tuition payments for members of his family, that's enough to send him to prison. And what some should understand is that they're basically saying any company that decides that in order to compensate a person, doesn't matter for what reason, it could be for a reason that doesn't make any sense, but let's say your company was going to say, you've been a good worker, whatever it is you do. Let's say you load peaches onto a gurney and wheel it over to a delivery truck. That's your entire job, and you do it so well, we're going to give you a free gondola. They would say, your company can't just give you the gondola and not report it. They have to report it, and you have to report it as income, and then you have to report it as a value and pay taxes on that gondola. It's almost as if the government is saying that transactions that are of um, you know, non-fungible nature between one person and another are not their business. It's the business of the government. Now, I get it. The tuition payments could be, you could easily evaluate that. You could easily say that, oh, that was just a way of them skirting the income reporting requirements by giving him the money, and then by not giving him the money, but actually paying a cost for him. But is the government that petty that they're going to put a man in prison, even if it's for only 100 days? In Rikers Island, a 75-year-old man, he happens to be an Orthodox Jewish accountant, worked for the same company for 50 years. There's no, again, I want to emphasize, the Trump organization, throughout the 50 years that he was working for them, or I guess it would be 22 years that he's the CFO, there is no provable crime that the Trump organization committed through his actions as a CFO, apart from giving him benefits that were improperly reported. Is that really something that in New York City, where you can stab a person and be on the street within 24 hours, where you can assault an Asian lady and be, the same thing, all these different violent crimes that get committed in New York City, where you can assault a bodega owner, or have, in the case of one lady, she had her boyfriend assault the bodega owner. The bodega owner killed him, and she assaulted him too, and she went off scot-free, never was charged. But Alan Weisselberg, who is this elderly accountant, he's the person who gets thrown in jail. That's the situation that I want to bring attention for. That's why I'm saying that this Merrick Garland Department of Justice, in this case, is actually Letitia James, I believe, the Attorney General of New York State. These people don't care about enforcing the law. They're trying to enforce a regime against a certain opponent, and it could get pretty scary if you think about it. They're willing to go after people just in order to make a point. They're not actually going to convict Donald Trump of any tax offenses in this particular instance, because Alan Weisselberg has said that he'll testify against the Trump organization in terms of how they arrange his benefits, meaning that he's basically taking the fall and causing them to get a fine as well. But he's not testifying against the Donald Trump. He's not testifying against the other members of the Trump family, Eric, Donald Jr. and Ivanka, who are also officers of the Trump organization. He's testifying basically against the company, and they're going to incur a penalty. And therefore, what real benefit is being garnered by the state of New York from pursuing this prosecution? The only benefit is to the prosecutors who are trying to make political points out of it. They're trying to say that we're going to go hardcore at the Trump family, at their business enterprises, at people associated with that business enterprise like Weisselberg, regardless of whether it's really in the public interest. Look, if he received a car for personal use, if he received tuition payments, and the state of New York is trying to say, well, some of the amount that was paid into that, if he would have reported it, it would have gone to the state of New York. So if the state of New York would have had several $100,000 more in terms of tax income from Alan Weisselberg, what difference would it have made? The state of New York runs deficits that are running into I think it's in the hundreds of billions of dollars every year now. And they have some of the worst fiscal discipline in the country. And they're trying to say that he defrauded the state of all this money, and the Trump organization conspired with him, and it was some grand scheme to send his kid to religious seminary or whatever it was. I mean, get real. And I couldn't help thinking about it. I know it's a little different from some of you out there. Him being a Jewish American, an Orthodox Jew, noticeably Orthodox Jewish. There are other Trump associates who are Jewish, maybe not Orthodox, who have taken the fall legally for their association with him. Michael Cohen was a different one a few years ago. Took the fall for, I have the statement here, Michael Cohen pleads guilty in Manhattan federal court to 8 counts, including criminal tax evasion and campaign finance violations. Now, Michael Cohen, of course, chose a different path. He flipped on Donald Trump and became a serious critic of his afterward, but it didn't really lead to any legal repercussions for Donald Trump, because a lot of these charges against Michael Cohen were unrelated to his activities as a personal attorney for Trump. Attorney for the United States, Robert Kazami, said, Michael Cohen is a lawyer who, rather than setting an example of respect for the law, instead chose to break the law repeatedly over many years in a variety of ways. His day of reckoning serves as a reminder that we are a nation of laws. So it says, now this is going to be interesting. In late 2013, Cohen retained an accountant for the purpose of handling Cohen's personal and entity tax returns. After being retained, accountant 1 filed amended Form 1040 tax returns for 2011 and 2012. For tax years 2013 through 2016, he prepared individual returns for Cohen and returns for Cohen's medallion and real estate entities. To confirm he had reviewed and approved these returns, both Cohen and his wife signed a Form A879 for tax years 2013 through 2016 and filed manually for tax year 2012. Between 2012 and the end of 2016, Cohen earned more than $2.4 million in income from a series of personal loans made by Cohen to a taxi operator to whom Cohen leased certain of his Chicago taxi medallions, none of which he disclosed to the IRS. So again, this was something, by the way, that they used in order to sustain that they were getting ground in the whole Mueller report investigation. They were trying to say that Michael Cohen was the first um, breach in the wall because they thought that they had Donald Trump dead to rights on collusion because Michael Cohen had not reported income from renting taxi medallions in Chicago. They never made a connection, right? So this entire time, this is what's so ridiculous about people who live in this universe where they think that Donald Trump is this criminal mastermind. If anything, he's a criminal, um, you know, he's a criminal puzzle, right? Like a puzzle that's not put together. Like all these schemes, they never seem to really have any sophistication. With all due respect to Donald Trump, Trump University was really a joke. It was a pretty simple scheme that he played a bunch of rubes. He deservedly paid a massive $25 million fine for that. Those are things that you could legitimately criticize him for. But to say that he was involved in some, elaborate criminal enterprises because one of his attorneys, Michael Cohen, had misreported his income to the IRS from some medallion rental scheme, that shows how ludicrous and detached from reality the minds are of those people that continue to think that this is a real threat to democracy, as they call it. So, one second, I lost the window size here. Um, this whole episode with Alan Weisselberg does have me worried because yes, there's him, there's Michael Cohen, there were two defendants in the Rudy Giuliani episode with Ukraine that were arrested, if you remember, when they came back from Ukraine one time and charged with God knows what. Let me see here. So one of them I remember was Lev Parnas. So um, it says he was an associate of Igor Fruman, and he was found guilty in U.S. federal court on 6 counts related to illegal donations to the 2020 campaign of Donald Trump. He was sentenced to 20 months in prison, 3 years of supervised release, and 2,300,000. So they bust these guys. They happen to be Jewish. Michael Cohen, Gold, what's his name? Weissglass. I forget what was his name. Uh, Weisselberg. So Michael Cohen, Alan Weisselberg, Lev Parnas, and they throw them in prison. They throw the book at them. They certainly threw the book at Alan Weisselberg, who, it's not as if he's sitting on a mountain of cash. These are benefits that were non-fungible, right? He couldn't just take the tuition money and go to Aruba or go to Macau and play at the casino. It's money that's paid to an institution. So the corruption here is of a very low bar. You could say that under the tax code, in a certain sense, you could construe this as a tax violation, but it doesn't mean that you have some elaborate criminal scheme here. So what has me thinking is that it doesn't matter how benign the person is who is being charged. These federal prosecutors are willing to go to the ends of the earth to put a scalp on the wall, regardless of whether it is a 75-year-old Orthodox Jewish accountant who basically didn't harm anyone. The money that was not reported was not really fungible, right? How can you? So they give him a car, and he's supposed to pay the government because he was loaned a car by his place of work. That, to me, is a sign of how overbearing our taxation scheme is. It's one of the reasons that the tax code is so problematic, that you could read the tax code. There's many accountants that will read the tax code and they'll come to completely different conclusions about how much income you need to report and how many deductions you need to make, because all of them have various ways of interpreting the tax code. It's just way too complicated. 30,000 pages and you expect people to have consistency out of it. So this certainly is an issue where I think people need to pay attention more. I know that there was the whole Alex Jones trial recently, and It's certainly something to be worried about, because that's another case of the government basically going after a person, not because of the crime being so heinous. Alex Jones, he told a bunch of, I guess, exaggerated theories about what happened at Sandy Hook, and the parents took offense, and they sued him, and they got, what is it, 45+ million of restitution levied against him. And you could say that it was in terrible taste and of um, dubious uh, public interest what Alex Jones was saying about Sandy Hook. But the fact is, if you're allowed to sue a person in court for giving you mental anguish through opinions that he's expressing, then any person can be sued now in the U.S. For anything that they publish online. Anybody could take offense to anything. If I make an article where I say that pico de gallo will probably lead you to contracting dysentery through some sort of issue when you leave it out in the sun, and people are very sensitive about their love for pico de gallo, and they think that I'm insulting their favorite food, I'm encroaching on their lifestyle. Can't they sue me in federal court now, just like they sued Alex Jones? I mean, where does this end? And I think it's very different from what was said um, about Nick Sandmann. Nick Sandmann was the kid who was slandered by a number of news organizations, uh, libeled by some newspapers, and they said that he was smirking and mocking and blocking a Native American protester in 2018, I believe. They said, Nick Sandmann, how dare he stand by the Lincoln Memorial and block this Native American, whose name I forget, Nathan Phillips, that was his name. How dare he do this? And then it emerged after all of these days when he was being slandered and threatened with physical harm and even rape, I believe. Um, it came out in the video that he wasn't blocking anyone, that he had been sitting there with a bunch of friends, or standing, waiting for their bus, and Nathan Phillips came up to them, and he wasn't going towards the Lincoln Memorial to begin with. And that in reality, a lot of the harassment that had happened at the Lincoln Memorial had been a bunch of black Hebrew Israelites who were actually harassing both Nathan Phillips and the Catholic school children that were there, including Nick Sandmann. So, in essence, you have really a regime of legal tyranny right now in the United States. You don't have the presumption of innocence anymore, because so long as you're associated with Donald Trump, you're guilty of something. That's their attitude. Now, you might not be guilty of anything that's politically sensitive. Okay, what Alan Weisselberg did had nothing to do with the political career of Donald Trump, or any of the other ambitions of the Trump family, whether it was Donald Jr. or Melania or Ivanka. He was simply running the financial affairs of the Trump organization, and they decided that either the Trump organization was going to get taken down for massive tax evasion, or somebody was, and they decided it would be him. So we're going to go through a longer list of some of these people who were so-called convicted in the Mueller report, and these things have to be reviewed. Why? Because we have to understand that this legal system, it's not looking to actually solve an issue. There was no Russian collusion to solve in the aftermath of the 2016 election. What had to be solved was that you had to paint Donald Trump and associates of his with this criminal brush, and classify all of that as part of this Russian collusion scheme. And the fact is that they were taken down during the Mueller investigation, regardless of whether it was connected to Russian collusion or not. That's what earned these people their days in court. So, to start with, so this is from Time Magazine. This article is actually pretty ridiculous. Here are all the indictments, guilty pleas, and convictions from Robert Mueller's investigation. So why did they write this article in 2019? The reason for that, okay, they published it in March 2019. That's when the Mueller probe was concluded, and they couldn't come up with an actual nexus between Donald Trump and the Russian government or any Russian intelligence agencies. They had to lay open this they had to leave open this question where they said, well, Donald Trump isn't really exonerated. We just don't have any proof of any conspiracy here. So they basically said, we don't think that you're innocent. We just can't prove that you're guilty. That's one of the ways that they leave open their bias there, because a person who is an honest prosecutor would say, well, I am excluding you from any further investigations into matters of Russian collusion, right? They wouldn't say that you're not exonerated. However, I can't convict you, because that would leave open this characterization of somebody as being suspicious, even though they couldn't be proven to be guilty, right? That's one of the issues when people are accused, for example, of rape. That how can you take back a rape accusation? Once somebody's been accused of rape and they may be acquitted, nevertheless, there are those who will always believe that they're guilty because their reputation has already been soiled. So we'll go through some of this list. I don't know if we can get through all of it, but some of these are just ridiculous. So these people were never convicted for a very obvious reason. The Russian troll farm, I think it was called it was called the Internet Research Agency. So it says Mueller's most sweeping charges are unlikely to lead to any convictions. In 2018, he charged the Internet Research Agency, a Russian troll farm, with meddling in the 2016 election. In an unusually detailed 37-page indictment, he spelled out how the Russians allegedly tricked Americans into following fake social media accounts filled with pro-Trump and anti-Clinton propaganda. The indictment also named 2 shell companies and 13 Russian nationals, including Yevgeny Prigozhin, who has been nicknamed Putin's chef for his ties to the Russian president. It's unlikely that any of the Russians will ever face a trial in the United States, but the charges make it harder for them to travel overseas. So, wasting time. Why would you even waste time with this agency? As the article explains, you're never going to be able to convict them because they'll never stand trial. And plus, the evidence that was presented against them didn't really spell out any crimes. Russian spies. So apparently, Russian spies, intelligence officers, were charged with stealing Democratic emails. Mueller's second big set of charges was of 12 Russian military intelligence officers. The similarly detailed 29-page indictment explains how the hackers allegedly used phishing attacks to steal files from the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton Presidential Library, then worked with WikiLeaks to distribute the information to damage Clinton's candidacy in an effort to help Trump win. It also explains how cryptocurrency was allegedly used to pay for the effort, as well as other attempts to penetrate state elections websites. These charges are also unlikely to ever lead to a trial in the United States. So there's 2 reasons why this would never lead to a trial. The first reason is for the same thing as the previous one, that these 12 people would probably never set foot in the United States, even more so now with the whole Ukraine invasion situation and American sanctions against Russia. The second reason is that the case would fall apart in court because it was never proven that Julian Assange received the DNC email leaks through the Russian government. It was never proven. There were all sorts of insinuations that there were hackers. There was the whole Fancy Bear thing. There was, I forget the name of this other person, but I think his name was Pussifer or something. So, or Goosifer 2.0. That was, they all had these very, 1 second. Can you hear me? Okay. I think you guys can hear my microphone at least. Okay. So for some reason it said that my volume is off. So I think that's my audio volume. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that they never were able to prove that Julian Assange had received anything from the Russians. And in all honesty, most people who actually look at the evidence believe that there was a person in the DNC who decided to leak those emails to Julian Assange, meaning that he would be, first of all, he would never be um, convicted in a federal court of that. They would have to convict him of something else, because as a journalist, it's his job to take information that's given to him by confidential sources and publish it if he thinks it's of public interest. So this indictment of the 12 Russian military officers probably would have led to no convictions, because they could never prove any communications between Julian Assange and any of them. And they still haven't. And now you even have the Biden administration in office. And have you ever heard, since he's come into office, Merrick Garland or Christopher Wray trying to pursue this line of interest that Julian Assange was an agent of the Russian government? No, because they can't. They can't actually show any evidence of it. So the next person is Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort, who was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison for financial crimes. So it says here, if there are direct connections between the Russian efforts and the Trump campaign, one potential contact might have been campaign chairman Paul Manafort, a longtime Republican consultant. Manafort worked overseas in recent years, including for a pro-Russia political party in Ukraine. Mueller charged Manafort with hiding tens of millions of dollars he earned for that work and lying to banks to get loans. In August, a jury in Virginia found Manafort guilty on 8 counts. It was unable to reach a verdict on 10 other counts. Manafort then pleaded guilty on related charges in a D.C. court and began cooperating with Mueller. However, prosecutors later said he breached their agreement by lying to them, and Manafort was sentenced to a total of 7.5 years in prison. So Paul Manafort is part of a familiar story, the same story that you'll hear about Alan Weisselberg and that you'll hear about Michael Cohen. The charges he was convicted for had nothing to do with Russian collusion in the 2016 election. They had to do with income he received that he didn't pay taxes for, connected to consulting work, which is his job, for the Party of Regions, which was a pro-Russia political party in Ukraine. It's now been banned basically by the Ukrainian government. But at the time, it was a totally legal business pursuit, and it could never be actually a convictable offense in a court of law, because at the time, everything that Manafort did was legal and above board. It wasn't illegal back in those days to work for a party like that as a consultant. How do we know that? Other people who were involved in that scheme were Tony Podesta and other actors within the Democratic Party who were partners of Paul Manafort in that consulting firm with the Party of Regions. And they never went after Tony Podesta for his work on behalf of this Ukrainian political party. Do we know whether Tony Podesta did anything else that was illegal during that scheme, like hiding his tax income? No, because they went after Paul Manafort because he's associated with Donald Trump. And what I'm trying to say is that when you convict a person based on how much they withheld in their taxes, or how much they paid in their taxes from income that they made in one of these questionable endeavors, if you're not looking into the other people involved, then it is clearly a selective and political prosecution, or just selective, right? It means that you are zeroing in on the one person that you really want to put in prison, and the other co-conspirators are irrelevant, not because they didn't break the law, but because you have it in for the other guy. So that's not the way the rule of law is supposed to work. The next person is Konstantin Kalimnik. It says, on the other side, a possible point of contact. It says here, possible point of contact might be Konstantin Kalimnik, who the FBI believes has ties to Russian intelligence. A former employee of Manafort's firm, Kalimnik was sometimes described as Manafort's Manafort, while Manafort reportedly called him, quote, my Russian brain. A poorly redacted court filing from Mueller's team inadvertently revealed that Manafort gave Kalimnik detailed polling information during the campaign and discussed the Ukrainian peace plan, then lied about both to Mueller, even when he was supposedly cooperating. Mueller charged Kilimnik with conspiracy to obstruct justice and obstruction of justice for allegedly attempting witness tampering during the Manafort investigation. So understand this. They can't prove that Konstantin Kilimnik is an agent of the Russian government because it says the FBI believes he has ties to the Russian intelligence. If they believe he has ties to Russian intelligence, maybe they don't have evidence of it. So instead, what they charged him with was conspiracy to obstruct justice because of his communications with Manafort during the trial. So it's basically a crime that was created through the prosecution of Paul Manafort that got Konstantin Kilimnik ensnared in it. It wasn't a crime that existed already before the investigation. It was simply trying to drag him into this criminal proceeding, um, using the criminal proceeding itself, the investigation. The next person is Roger Stone. It says on November 15th, longtime Trump confidant Roger Stone was found guilty of all 7 counts he faced, including lying to Congress, tampering with a witness, and obstructing a congressional investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. Mueller charged Stone with lying to the House Intelligence Committee in 2017 about his contacts with WikiLeaks and tampering with a key witness who could discredit his version of events. He has repeatedly denied any wrongdoing. Stone's sentencing hearing is scheduled for February 6th. So I believe Stone did spend a little bit of time in jail. What they're talking about is that when he went to Congress, Roger Stone was saying that he had contact with Julian Assange when he didn't. And they therefore, they convicted him for lying about his connection, about affirming his connection to Julian Assange that he didn't actually have. So they're basically, there's this issue with Congress where if you lie to Congress, but you're lying in order to convict Donald Trump, they don't want to charge you, right? This is it's very ironic. This is what happened during the Kavanaugh hearings. You had Christine Blasey Ford who went to the Kavanaugh hearings and lied the entire time, or was telling tales that had no corroboration at the time, and lied about having a fear of flying. And there was no actual attempt to convict her or investigate her for any of the lies. Why? Because it wasn't politically expedient. She was on the right side of history, according to these prosecutors. But Roger Stone, who fibbed and sort of used his appearance in front of Congress in order to gain attention, stupidly, they decided we're going to put him in jail because he didn't talk to WikiLeaks when he said that he did. If he would have said that he did talk to WikiLeaks, and he did, they would have tried to convict him on those counts. So this is another case of the government pursuing people for the sake of its own end, of putting them in prison, of making their lives miserable, making them spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on attorney's fees and bankrupting them, as happened with Roger Stone. Not because they were trying to fight Russian infiltration of our government and our electoral system, but because they don't like Roger Stone. Why? Because Roger Stone is connected to Donald Trump, and this is it's just an obsession. It's vindictive. It's something that you have to look at as some sort of blood vendetta that these people have. Let me check the chat real quick. Let me see if there's people who have been trying to comment. You can always put a comment down there if you have any questions. So, the cooperators. Okay, former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn pleaded guilty to lying to investigators. What happened in that case? Michael Flynn went down for vacation in the Caribbean, and during his time there, he was called by the Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak, who wanted him to try to, mediate and perhaps work out something regarding American sanctions against Russia. And in reality, what happened after that was the FBI visited Michael Flynn. They didn't tell him he was under investigation. They didn't. He asked whether he needed an attorney present. They said, "Well, no, we're not really investigating you." Then they wrote down their account of their conversation with him in an FBI 302 form, which is how they record interviews, they don't actually record it with audio or video, which is the way we do it ever since video or audio recorders were invented. They take a notepad and they write it down as an FBI 302. So if your version of events contradicts the notes of an FBI agent as they're writing in shorthand, you can be convicted of lying to the FBI. It's one of the easiest ways to basically secure an easy, if cheap, conviction. Um, and what ended up being the case? There was no actual conspiracy between the Russian government and Michael Flynn. It was all about entrapping him, trying to catch him in a lie, trying to get him convicted of violating the FARA regulations, the Foreign Agent Registration Act regulation, because he was a consultant for, I think, the government of Turkey as a lobbyist, and he registered, but he didn't register completely correctly. So they said, well, he's a liar, and you have to put him in prison because he lied to the FBI, and and they were going to throw his son in prison, who was also involved in the lobbying effort. And all of this is to say that you don't have to like Michael Flynn. You might think he's sort of a chucklehead and a clown, that he got into this predicament in the first place, and that he trusted the FBI to begin with. But you have to remember that this is the guy who was slated to be the national security advisor to Donald Trump when he got into the White House. And in his capacity, he might have been thinking, when the FBI agent stopped by, that had to do with his upcoming work as the national security advisor. He didn't automatically think, oh, they're trying to entrap me and get me to lie about something. He was of the mindset that he's going to be interacting with the FBI on a regular basis as the national security advisor. And he didn't exactly have his story straight, apparently, and they decided to convict him. But in the event, they never were able to prove any real conspiracy on the part of Michael Flynn. In fact, on the contrary, they actually ruined the life of a woman named Svetlana Lokhova, who was a Russian woman living in the UK, who happened to attend the same dinner party that Michael Flynn was at. And I think they took a taxi after the event. And Stefan Halper, who was an intelligence source for, I believe, the CIA, supplied information claiming that Michael Flynn was having an affair with Svetlana Lokhova. Well, as it turns out, they weren't having an affair. And also, as it turns out, contrary to what Stefan Halper was saying, Svetlana Lokhova was not an agent of the Russian government. So all of this innuendo, all of this suspicion that was cast on Michael Flynn, who's a married man, by the way, and on Svetlana Lokhova, who's also married to, I think, a British citizen, that was all made in order to ruin their lives, in order to bring down the Trump administration at the time. It wasn't made in the pursuit of justice or fighting national security threats. It was literally in order to ensnare these people. And that's just one more case of people being prosecuted, not because of crimes that they committed, but because of who they were associated with. Former Trump campaign aide Rick Gates pleaded guilty to lying to investigators. Another valuable source of information for Mueller was Rick Gates, Manafort's longtime business partner, a top aide on the Trump campaign, and deputy chairman of the Presidential Inauguration Committee. Facing up to 6 years in prison, Gates pleaded guilty in 2018 to lying to investigators and conspiring to commit other offenses. He agreed to cooperate with Mueller's investigation. Earlier this month, prosecutors asked for the fifth time that his sentencing be delayed, citing his continued cooperation in several ongoing investigations. So again, there's no actual evidence of a national security threat or espionage act that was being committed here. They're just interviewing these people, trying to catch them in a lie about something else that they're doing, and convicting them of that. It has nothing to do with whether Russia infiltrated the U.S. 2016 election. It has nothing to do with whether it was Russia that facilitated the DNC leaks to WikiLeaks. all of that was a bunch of nonsense. It never had anything to do with that. These people were railroaded legally in order to get to Donald Trump. Regardless of whether you like him as a person, regardless of whether you agree with his policies, this is the definition of politically biased prosecution, of police state mentality. And people who support this have to remember that it could happen to other candidates, candidates that they do like. It could happen to a person like Bernie Sanders if they run afoul of the law for a certain reason, right? And when I say the law, I'm saying the people who are at the Department of Justice. It could happen to Ralph Nader. It could happen to, who's another person. Throw out your favorite person out there. It could happen to celebrities, right? When you have a legal system, a justice system, investigation departments like the FBI that are politically biased and compromised, they're oriented towards achieving goals that have nothing to do with enforcing the laws, but rather enforcing the will of the government, then any person has to wonder whether they're going to run afoul of the people who hold that power, the power of prosecution. Next, we get to Michael Cohen. We actually went over that already. Former Trump campaign advisor George Papadopoulos served 12 days in prison for lying to investigators. That's one of the favorite stories I heard. The way I understand what happened was he told okay, so it says part of it here. After he told an Australian diplomat in a bar that the Russians might have damaging information on Clinton, the diplomat passed the information to the FBI. When prosecutors first approached him in January of 2017, Papadopoulos repeatedly lied about his contacts with Russian agents. He pleaded guilty to lying to investigators and was sentenced to 14 days in prison, a year of probation, and a $9,500 fine. He was released from a minimum security facility after 12 days with credit for time spent in jail after being indicted. So that's how serious this conspiracy was, that George Papadopoulos was convicted based on lying about contacts with Russian agents. Now, I can tell you that the people that were classified as Russian agents for the purpose of his prosecution, there was very little evidence that they were Russian agents. One of them was named Joseph Mifsud, who was a Maltese citizen. Malta is a nation in the Mediterranean Sea between Italy and Tunisia. So Joseph Mifsud, there's more evidence that he's connected to British intelligence than there is that he's connected to Russian intelligence. And the other person, I believe, was I forget his name, but he was also either in Greece or in Israel. And they gave George Papadopoulos $10,000 in cash in order to begin talking about, basically as sort of a goodwill gift. Now, George Papadopoulos, in an interview that I heard of him, I think with Dan Bongino, actually said that when he received the $10,000 in cash, he knew there could be a problem because the person who gave it to him seemed like a very shifty and untrustworthy person. So rather than take the $10,000 in cash back to the U.S., he deposited it with a lawyer in Greece and then came back to the U.S. When he was met at the airport by FBI agents, they were expecting him to hold $10,000 in cash that they could then trace to that person that he gave it to and say that he had been paid in order to give aid and comfort to the enemy. When he didn't have the money on him, when it was also not, they could also impound it for being undeclared cash or cash that was above $10,000. They didn't have the goods, so they couldn't actually convict him of what they wanted to convict him for. So they had to give him this token 14-day sentence. And when you actually hear, this is something that I want people to understand. When you hear from their mouths what happened to them, George Papadopoulos, how he was basically given the runaround, how Stefan Halper, the person who was his boss, as part of this whole saga, who was also a CIA agent, basically sent uh, another intelligence source named Azra Turk in order to make contact with him and supposedly work with him on some project. But in reality, she was flirting with him and trying to induce him into, you know, having a relationship with her, while also asking him about, at the same time, whether the Trump campaign was having contact with Russian agents. You realize that for this whole scheme, there was no actual crime in question, because they could never tie George Papadopoulos to anyone who was really an agent of the Russian government. The only people that they could tie him to were people who were asking him about whether he was an agent of the Russian government. So it's almost like you are guilty by virtue of the fact that you're being investigated and you interacted with the people who are trying to entrap you. That's what entrapment is. That there's a person who is trying to get you to commit a crime, and you do it, and they catch you, and therefore you're the guilty person, not the person who tried to get you to do the dirty deed. This is another person who, you know, these people are some poor saps, and you know, it, maybe I shouldn't be laughing, but it is sort of a humorous situation. Not humorous for them. Alex van der Zwaan served 30 days in prison for lying to investigators. So this is a person who, um, you won't hear his name because there's no way to there's no actual way to fit him into the story that makes the picture come clearer in terms of Russian collusion. In a normal situation, he would have been unindicted, right? You know why he would he have been unindicted? Because he didn't actually contribute anything either way. Dutch attorney Alex van der Zwaan pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about contacts with Rick Gates and an unnamed person in Ukraine. He served 30 days in jail and was deported from the United States. So all he did was lie to the FBI about talking to Rick Gates and talking to another person in Ukraine. Possibly also the unnamed person in Ukraine. Why is he unnamed? It could be that he was an intelligence source for the FBI or CIA or a different intelligence agency. So did he do anything else? Did all he do was lie to the FBI about whether he had a conversation? What was the significance of the conversation itself, that you would put a person in prison for 30 days? That's the real question, not whether he lied about having the conversation or not. Then there's some people that I'd never even heard about. Richard Pinedo, sentenced to 6 months in prison for identity theft. A California man who ran a website selling dummy bank accounts to eBay and Facebook, Richard Pinedo, pleaded guilty to identity theft as part of the investigation into Russian hackers. He was sentenced to 6 months in prison and 6 months of home detention. So missing from here, missing from that information, is how that in any way was connected to Russia, and how that was connected to the Trump campaign. So you know, bravo, they caught an identity thief who had nothing to do with anything else that's going on here. That was the big accomplishment of the Mueller investigation. Sam Patton pleaded guilty to failing to register as a foreign lobbyist. After investigating Republican lobbyist Sam Patton, Mueller's team handed the case to career prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. There, he pleaded guilty to failing to register as a lobbyist for Ukrainian clients while working with Kalimnik, helping a client get around restrictions on foreign donations in order to get tickets to Trump's inauguration, and misleading congressional investigators. So this isn't really an espionage case. It's just somebody who failed to file paperwork. Bijan Kian and Skim Alptekin charged with conspiring to violate lobbying laws. Mueller's team referred Bijan Kian and Skim Alptekin, two former associates. Hold on a second. Okay, I think you guys are still able to see me, right? Okay. I just need to check the connectivity. So the live version is basically offline. We'll have to upload the I don't know why the hell it won't keep streaming, but I'm gonna upload the rest of this later to all the other um, video hosting sites. But we're gonna keep reading this. There's only a few more left. So Bijan Kian were two former associates of Flynn. I guess they were Turkish or something. Trump's national security advisor to federal prosecutors in Virginia, who charged them with conspiracy to violate federal lobbying rules for their work on behalf of a Turkish campaign to expel a rival of President Erdogan. Alptekin was also charged with lying to investigators. So that's another one. There's no connection to Russia here. There's no connection to espionage. There's no connection to WikiLeaks. The only connection is that they knew Michael Flynn and they worked with him. So it's not really part of a conspiracy. Here's Gregory Craig, acquitted on charges of lying to authorities. Gregory Craig, a longtime Washington Democratic attorney, was acquitted on September 4th, 2019 of a felony charge that he lied to authorities about work he did on behalf of the Ukrainian government 7 years ago. Craig worked for former President Bill Clinton and served as White House counsel during the Obama administration, but the trial wasn't over whether Craig worked for Ukraine. It rested on whether Craig deliberately misled the Justice Department while he investigated whether he needed to register as a foreign agent. After 5 hours of deliberation, a jury found him not guilty. So now you have to realize that he was charged for the same crime as Michael Flynn, charged for the same crime as some of the other people that were in this, like George Papadopoulos. But because they said, well, maybe he didn't really mean to lie, he got off the hook. And then here's another thing. So Vin Weber and Tony Podesta, Justice Department ends investigation. So I already mentioned Tony Podesta earlier. Mueller's team also referred two high-powered Washington insiders to federal prosecutors in New York for investigations into violations of foreign lobbying laws. Former Obama administration White House counsel Gregory Craig, former Republican Representative Vin Weber of Minnesota, and Tony Podesta, brother of Clinton's 2016 campaign manager. In September, federal prosecutors ended the investigation into the two lobbyists. Per Politico, Weber still resigned from his lobbying firm in August. So you have here plenty of evidence that there's people who committed the same crimes as those people who were actually convicted under the Mueller report, under the Mueller investigation, but they didn't actually get prosecuted because coincidentally they were an Obama administration attorney. They were the brother of John Podesta, who was a senior Obama administration official and the chair of the Hillary Clinton 2016 campaign. That is a sign that there is no equal protection under the law. Because if they were really concerned about dealing with these crimes, if it really is a problem to lie to the FBI, you wouldn't be throwing someone in jail for 14 days for doing it while letting a different person off the hook because you say they didn't mean to lie. And that's really the point I'm trying to make, that you don't have an even playing field by any means anymore. You have, on the one hand, a party of people, really a group of people. They're not even a party, the Trump camp of the GOP, who are the targets constantly of these legal investigations. And those people who are saying that this is simply an issue of decency, and if he has nothing to hide, he shouldn't be afraid of being investigated. You have to realize that a lot of the people who were thrown in jail for this whole Mueller investigation that already happened, and now Alan Weisselberg separately for an investigation of these massive crimes that the Trump organization, this corporation, supposedly has all of these crimes that they were committing, and yet the most that they could squeeze out of this whole saga was tax evasion on the part of the CFO for not reporting business perks. That shows that this is really pursuit not of justice, but of a person, of a group of people. And persecution is really what I should say. So you have the persecuted group on the one hand, Trump associates and Donald Trump, and you have the persecutors, the Department of Justice, the intelligence agencies, the Democratic Party and its activists, the media that constantly gins up these stories and feeds the flames of these intelligence and Justice Department investigations of Donald Trump. And then once after all the smoke clears, it becomes evident that you have people like, you know, Paul Manafort being thrown in jail for crimes that happened years before this whole Russia collusion issue with Donald Trump. You have Alex Van der Zwaan thrown in prison for 30 days for lying about having a conversation with somebody that nobody's even precisely sure why that conversation was important. They don't apologize. They don't say, we were wrong. We shouldn't have done this. This person, they didn't deserve to go to jail. We ruined a person's life simply because we hated another person that they may have worked for or interacted with. They say no. They say we're trying to get this person because he is a threat to everything that we are for, everything that we believe in. That is the type of person that you see, the Sam Harris type. So there was video that came out not long ago about Sam Harris where he makes some very stunning admissions. Let me see here. So I'm going to use this Facebook video for lack of a better source.
I would not have cared, right? It's like, there's nothing. At that point, Hunter Biden literally could have had the corpses of children in his basement. I would not have cared, right? It's like, there's nothing. First of all, it's Hunter Biden, right? It's not Joe Biden. But even if whatever scope of Joe Biden's corruption is, like if we could just go down that rabbit hole endlessly and understand that he's getting kickbacks from Hunter Biden's deals in Ukraine or wherever else, right? Or China. It is infinitesimal compared to the corruption we know Trump is involved in. It's like a firefly to the sun, right? I mean, like there's just, it doesn't even stack up against Trump University, right? Trump University as a story is worse than anything that could be in Hunter Biden's laptop, in my view, right? Now that doesn't answer the people who say it's still completely unfair to not have looked at the laptop in a timely way and to have shut down the New York Post's Twitter account. Like that's just a conspiracy. That's a left-wing conspiracy to deny the presidency to Donald Trump. Absolutely, it was. Absolutely, right? But I think it was warranted. Right. And again, it's a coin toss as to whether or not
Sam, I'm sorry.
That particular piece.
I'm really sorry. I was the one that said we should move on, but you've just said something I really struggle with there, which is
the kids in the basement?
Fuck the kids in the basement. I'm interested in democracy. You're saying you are content with a left-wing conspiracy to prevent somebody being democratically re-elected as president.
Well, no, I'm content. Well, but the thing is, it's just not left-wing, right? So Liz Cheney is not left-wing. Right, Liz Cheney is doing everything in her power.
You're content with a conspiracy to prevent somebody being democratically elected.
But there's nothing. Conspiracy. It's not. It was a conspiracy out in the open. But it doesn't matter if it was. It doesn't matter what part's conspiracy, what part's out in the open. I mean, I think it's like if people get together and talk about what should we do about this phenomenon. If it's like if there was an asteroid hurtling toward Earth, and we got in a room together with all of our friends and had a conversation about what we could do to deflect its course, right? Is that a conspiracy? Like some of
So that's the mindset that we're dealing with. People who are so biased and hateful to a political figure that he's actually willing to admit, I don't care what Hunter Biden did. I don't care whether it's true that he was taking kickbacks. I don't care whether it's true that he was committing sex crimes. I don't care whether it's true that he was throwing a handgun into the garbage and it was close to a school and could have potentially endangered children. I don't care, because the most important thing for me is dealing with this real imminent threat of Donald Trump. That is the mindset of the Department of Justice. You could put Sam Harris's audio or video clip here on the Department of Justice's website to explain, or CNN or MSNBC, that explains their mindset. That explains who they are. They don't have any they don't have any commitment to any values or beliefs or principles apart from pursuing this one person. So I think that's it for tonight. I'm sorry that the live stream itself got derailed. Please like, share, and subscribe. And you can also find me on all these other social media platforms in the link tree below. And have a great Thursday night and weekend. Bye-bye.